Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Laik Siddiqui, the father of holophase. Pattern is primary. Phi is circular comparability. Only relations are public. Claims need declared assumptions, types, identities, and windows. Difference comes first. Lifts make local change readable. Jets show layered local structure. Time, space, and motion are readouts. Now we ask, where does pattern language stop? The edges of a phi pattern claim, domains, excision, and aliasing. There comes a moment in every serious science when it must prove its character, not by saying what it knows, but by saying what it does not know, not by speaking more, but by knowing where speech must stop. Up to now, our journey has been a journey of discovery. We began by showing that pattern is not a decorative extra laid on top of reality. Pattern is what makes reality publicly intelligible at all. Then we moved deeper and found phi, the primitive permission for distinction. Then deeper still, phi is circular, not linear, so there is no privileged absolute zero. Then another major step. What is public is not absolute value, but relation, difference, invariant structure. Then we built the disciplines needed to keep this science honest: anti-smuggling, type discipline, identity separation, declared windows, first readable difference, lawful local lifts, layered local signatures, and then the great inversion that what we call time, space, and motion are not primitive containers, but readouts of one deeper pattern structure. That is a powerful foundation. But now the foundation must pass a harder test, because every language, no matter how disciplined, has edges. Every operation, no matter how lawful, has conditions under which it ceases to be lawful. Every window, no matter how carefully declared, contains places where some specific act of reading becomes undefined, unstable, counterfeit, or simply not earned. That is what this part is about. This part introduces three deeply important ideas: domain, where a specific operation is actually lawful; excision, the honest cutting away of regions where the operation is not lawful; aliasing, counterfeit pattern appearance caused by bad or insufficient access. These are not technical decorations. They are among the strongest honesty laws in the whole framework. Because if a science cannot tell you where its language breaks, then sooner or later it will begin speaking falsely with confidence. And that is the beginning of corruption. The first hard lesson: seeing something is not the same as lawfully operating on it. Imagine you are looking through a window at a garden. You can see the whole garden: the trees, the path, the grass, the pond, the flowers, the fence. That whole visible field is your window. It is the region you are looking at. Now, suppose you want to do something more precise than merely look. You might want to count all the flowers. You might want to estimate the exact slope of the path. You might want to trace the edge of the pond. You might want to compare leaf shapes from one tree to another. The moment you do that, something important changes. Although the whole garden is within view, not every part of it is equally lawful for every operation. The flowers in shadow may be too hard to count. The path under fallen leaves may hide its true edge. The pond surface may be reflecting sunlight too strongly for accurate tracing. The far branches may be too distant to support fine shape comparison. So there is a difference between where you are looking and where a specific operation is lawful. That difference is the beginning of part 11. A window is where you look. A domain is where a given operation is lawful inside that window. This distinction is simple, but it changes everything. Because science often gets corrupted precisely when people confuse these two. They think, I can see it, therefore I can measure it, differentiate it, compare it, extend it, and certify it. But no, seeing is broader than lawful operation. Presence in the window does not automatically grant legal readability for every scientific act. That is why we need domains. Window and domain are not the same thing. Let us make this distinction as clear as possible. A window answers the question, where are you looking? A domain answers the question, for this specific operation, where is your language lawful? This means domain is always operation specific. The domain for simply detecting whether something is present may be broad. The domain for estimating local slope may be smaller. The domain for taking second derivatives may be smaller still. The domain for interpolation across missing data may be broken entirely. This is one of the central maturity tests of the framework. It refuses to speak as if legality were uniform. It says instead, one operation may be lawful here, but not there. Another may be lawful there, but not here. And no operation earns universality simply because the whole region is visible. A mountain in mist makes this clear. You may lawfully say, there is a mountain here. That may be a good existence claim. But can you lawfully estimate curvature of its ridge through the fog? Not necessarily. Can you lawfully trace a continuous path across the hidden section? No, not without more. Can you lawfully differentiate the contour through the obscure region? Again, no. Same window, different operations, different lawful domains. This is why domain discipline is not optional. Without it, science quietly overreaches. 3. Why operations fail inside the window? Now we can ask the next question. Why would an operation fail inside the window at all? If the region is already in view, why should language stop there? There are many reasons, and they are all important. Defect cores. Some places are structurally special. The pattern itself contains an obstruction. There may be a singularity, a topological defect, a vortex core, a crack tip, a place where ordinary smooth language cannot pass in the way you want. The region is real, the pattern is real, but your chosen operation may fail there. Cut neighborhoods. Part 8 taught us about branch cuts. Sometimes local readability requires a declared seam. Around that seam, representation jumps. If you then act as though the seam were not there, you violate legality. A cut neighborhood is visible, but not lawfully seamless for every operation. Resolution failure. The structure may be finer than your access allows. You may see a blur where a better instrument would reveal rich detail. In that case, the operation that depends on fine detail is not lawful there. Sampling failure. You may simply not have enough points, enough density, enough lawful comparisons to support the operation. This is one of the great sources of counterfeit certainty. Instability. The pattern or the instrument may fluctuate so strongly that the operation cannot produce stable public output. Aliasing. Worst of all, the access method may generate the appearance of a pattern that is not lawfully there at all. We will return to aliasing in depth because it is one of the most dangerous threats in the whole framework. For now, the key lesson is this. A window tells you where access occurs. A domain tells you where a specific act of reading remains lawful. 4. Excision, the courage to stop. Now we reach one of the noblest ideas in this chapter. Suppose an operation is not lawful in some region. What should a disciplined science do? It should not pretend. It should not smooth over the problem. It should not quietly fill in the missing segment. It should not continue the curve as though nothing happened. It should excise the region. Excision means declared removal of the region from the operation's lawful support. In ordinary language, excision means saying, for this operation, I must stop here. This matters enormously because many sciences and many people hate stopping. They would rather produce a fake smooth result than leave a gap. They would rather invent continuity than admit a break. They would rather speak falsely than stay silent. Part 11 forbids that. It says, if the language is undefined there, unstable there, aliased there, or not lawfully earned there, then cut the region out for that operation. Not forever, not metaphysically, not because reality disappears there, but because for this operation, under this window, your scientific right to speak has ended. That is excision. And excision is not failure, it is honesty. Excision is not a weakness of science. This point must be felt deeply. Excision is not the science admitting defeat. It is the science protecting truth. Suppose you are reconstructing an ancient manuscript, but the middle section has burned away. The worst thing you can do is invent words and quietly print them as though they were original. The honest thing is to mark the burned region as missing. Suppose you are drawing a map, but thick fog hides a dangerous pass. The worst thing you can do is sketch a clean road through it because a clean road looks nicer. The honest thing is to leave the region uncertain or blank. Suppose you are analyzing medical imaging, but one region is corrupted by motion artifact. The worst thing you can do is interpret the artifact as anatomy. The honest thing is to mark the region as non-lawful for that reading. Excision is the same kind of honesty. It says, I know where my language works. I know where it stops. I refuse counterfeit continuity. I refuse fabricated precision. That is not weakness. That is scientific character. A simple example, the broken bridge. Imagine a bridge crossing a canyon. You can stand on one side and see the far side clearly, but the middle section has collapsed. Now imagine someone says, since I can see both ends, I will treat the bridge as continuous and calculate the walking path straight across. That would be absurd. Visibility of both ends does not restore the missing middle. The missing section must be acknowledged. That acknowledgement is the spirit of excision. In pattern science, when a domain breaks, operations do not magically leap the gap just because the two lawful regions are both visible. You do not differentiate across the missing span. You do not interpolate through it as though the hidden middle were known. You do not fabricate a continuous road because continuity would be convenient. The excision remains until lawfully breached. Aliasing, counterfeit pattern appearance. Now we come to one of the most dangerous ideas in this entire part. Aliasing is not just uncertainty. It is not just noisy data. It is not just incomplete access. Aliasing is something more deceptive. It is counterfeit pattern appearance produced by insufficient sampling or illegal comparison. That means an alias can look real. It can look clean. It can look persuasive. It can even look beautiful. But it is not the lawful pattern of the underlying target. It is an artifact of the access method. Think of a spinning wagon wheel in film that appears to rotate backward. Think of a fan under strobe light that seems almost still. Think of a digital image of fine cloth producing moire bands that are not in the cloth itself. Think of audio sampled too slowly so that a high note masquerades as a lower one. These are not discoveries of the underlying pattern. They are access-generated ghosts. That is aliasing. And aliasing is deadly for science because it can trick us into certifying the wrong pattern with confidence. Why aliasing is so dangerous? Aliasing matters because it attacks the very heart of public certification. Pattern science tries to distinguish lawful pattern from artifact. Aliasing blurs that distinction by producing artifacts that wear the mask of pattern. It can make stillness appear as oscillation, forward motion appear backward, high frequency appear low, fine texture appear coarse, irregularity appear smooth, one pattern appear as another. So aliasing is not a harmless technical glitch. It is a direct anti-certification risk. A scientist who ignores aliasing may announce a discovery when in fact they have discovered only the limitations of their access method. The danger grows because aliases often look more orderly than the truth. They flatter our desire for simple structure. They reward haste. That is why this framework treats aliasing so seriously. A moving fan and a false world. Imagine a fan spinning very fast. To the naked eye, it blurs. To a camera with one frame rate, it appears to turn slowly forward. To another, it seems frozen. To another, it appears to move backward. Which fan is real? The fan itself is one pattern, but the access systems generate different apparent motion patterns. Only one of them matches the underlying lawful motion. The others are aliases. Now, imagine someone built an entire theory of fan behavior from the backward illusion. They would not merely be uncertain, they would be wrong, because access had generated counterfeit legibility. This is the lesson of aliasing. Not every pattern-like appearance belongs to the target. Some appearances belong only to the relationship between target and access. And unless that is checked, science certifies ghosts. Aliasing is not a lawful pattern of the target. This must be stated cleanly. Aliasing is not the target pattern. An alias may itself be studied as an artifact of sampling, and that is perfectly lawful. But it must not be mistaken for the lawful structure of the underlying thing. This distinction matters. You can study mirages as atmospheric artifacts. You can study optical illusions as features of perception. You can study aliasing as a property of measurement systems. But you may not take the alias and present it as the underlying pattern without explicit lawful breach. That would be fraud against reality, even if done unintentionally. No differentiation across excised zones. Now we arrive at one of the strictest laws in this part. Once a region is excised, you may not perform operations across it as though it were transparent. Why? Because doing so fabricates continuity where no lawful comparison exists. If you differentiate across a defect core, you erase the very abstraction that matters. If you interpolate across an aliasing zone, you pretend resolution was sufficient when it was not. If you connect two lawful regions through a broken middle as though the break were not there, you invent a path you did not earn. This is direct corruption of pattern science. Continuity must be lawful, not wished into existence. So the rule is simple. No differentiation, interpolation, or continuity presuming operation across excised zones without explicit lawful justification. 12. Honest silence as scientific virtue. This brings us to the moral center of Part 11. A mature science includes disciplined silence. It can say, language becomes undefined here. This region is outside the lawful domain of the operation. Continuity is not certified across this cut. Aliasing risk remains unresolved. The current window does not support public speech beyond this point. That silence is not emptiness. It is one of the highest forms of truthfulness. Because false speech is worse than admitted limit. A blank region honestly marked is stronger than a smooth curve fabricated through ignorance. A withheld claim is stronger than a counterfeit one. A science that knows where it cannot speak is a science that can be trusted where it does speak. The formal discipline of Part 11. Part 11 therefore installs the domain legality gate, often shortened to DOM. This gate asks three central questions. Has the operation-specific domain been declared? Have excisions been marked? Have aliasing risks been assessed? If the answer to any of these is no, then the claim is not ready for certification. Why? Because without those declarations, the science may be speaking beyond its lawful reach, and public pattern science must never do that. This part also previews several supporting artifacts: a domain map, an excision mask, a sampling adequacy report. These are not bureaucratic ornaments, they are visible forms of honesty. They show where language works, where it stops, and why. Firewalls installed by this part. Part 11 erects several important firewalls. No extrapolation across excised regions as if continuous. No hidden alias filtering presented as raw discovery. No sampled artifact treated as lawful target pattern without adequacy checks. No assumption that operations remain lawful over the full window without proof. These firewalls matter because human beings constantly want smoother stories than reality permits. Part 11 resists that temptation. It says, the map is not improved by invented roads. Everyday life and the discipline of domain. This chapter is not only about technical science. In life too, people constantly fail to respect domains. They hear two sentences from a long conversation and think they understand the relationship. They see one angry face and think they understand the whole person. They read one headline and think they understand the country. They sample too little and certify too much. That is everyday aliasing. That is everyday domain violation. So part 11 is also a discipline of wisdom. It teaches, do not certify a whole pattern from weak access. Do not pretend your operation is lawful where it is not. Do not bridge gaps with confidence merely because your mind dislikes blanks. What this part gives us. By the end of part 11, several crucial things are installed. First, the distinction between window and domain becomes permanent. Second, excision becomes a noble scientific act rather than an embarrassment. Third, aliasing is recognized as counterfeit pattern appearance caused by access failure. Fourth, honest silence becomes part of the science rather than a sign of weakness. Fifth, the domain gate becomes part of the rigor architecture. Without these, later work on defects, topology, calibration, and public certification would be dangerously vulnerable. With them, the science becomes much harder to fool. Refusal conditions. This part also gives us clear refusal conditions. A claim must be refused if it assumes operation legality over the full window without declaration. It hides excised regions. It fails to assess aliasing where aliasing materially matters. It differentiates or interpolates across illegal gaps without lawful bridge. It presents sampled artifacts as lawful target patterns without adequacy checks. These refusals are not punishments. They are protections against counterfeit pattern. Final image, the burned manuscript. Imagine an ancient manuscript rescued from fire. The middle lines are readable. The edges are charred away. Some letters are clear, some are warped by heat. Some words may be guessed, but not lawfully restored. An undisciplined scholar fills the gaps and publishes a smooth, completed version. A disciplined scholar marks what is readable, what is uncertain, what is excised, and what cannot yet be lawfully said. Which scholar serves truth? Always the second. That second scholar is part 11. It teaches us that the blank, the excised, the unstable, and the aliased are not embarrassments to hide. They are boundaries to honor. And only a science that honors its boundaries can someday move beyond them without corruption. Handoff to part 12. Once domains and excisions matter, another truth becomes unavoidable. The edges themselves are no longer neutral. Boundaries shape pattern behavior. If a pattern is pinned at the edge, that matters. If it wraps around, that matters. If it reflects, absorbs, or repeats at the boundary, that matters. So after learning where language stops, we must next learn that boundaries themselves are part of the pattern story. That is where we go next. Part 12. Boundary conditions as part of phi pattern itself. Always, peace be upon you.